Well, here we are in the goat shed this morning. It's Thursday, the 18th of November, 2021. It's about 18 degrees Celsius outside, which is about 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Today we're going to have a look at an FS AS relay. This one's out of a super spin we've just had come in. Now you can see this side of the circuit board is really bad, and the other side isn't too bad at all. It's fairly unusual, but we're going to rebuild this. Now the first thing we do is take the spring off, which just fits on here, and there's the other anchor point there. This is the armature and drive pawl. Now these get fairly, or can get fairly worn. This one's got a little bit of wear here, so a Dremel flapping tool will fix that up. I also like to Dremel across here and across the edge, just lightly, just to clean that up, or a file, whatever you've got available. Now we'll pull this apart. Now the first thing we're going to do is remove these two screws here, and that will allow us to take the contact points off, and we'll do the same to the other side. I also like to check everything as I go, so we'll make sure all the tracks are good on the board. Got a bit of verdigrease here. Hopefully that's all okay. It hasn't eaten away at anything. I don't think it would have. So we'll proceed to pull this apart now. Now this unit, we've taken it apart, got those circuit boards there to clean up. This is actually totally seized. That gear won't move. Now I think part of the problem here is look at all that rust there. So we're going to have to take the frame out, the gear out, and do a rink a little bit more deeper than what we normally would. So this hasn't had any attention for 20 years we know of, this machine. Graham remembers going to a guy's house and looking at it and then never saw it again, till it's turned up in the goat shed. So yeah, it hasn't been used much. So yeah, a fair bit of attention is needed on that. So let's proceed. What we'll do, we'll simply unscrew the screws on the brackets on the other side there, those two screws there. We'll take that bracket off and we'll see why this won't move, because that's just not right. It looks like it definitely is all the rust. All right, so that cleaned up rather nicely, that one that was filthy dirty, and got all that verdigrease off it. Same on the other side, it's come up quite nice as well. So we've got this all working now. That rust on that side, best I can clean it up, but had to put a rat tail file through the hole there to clean that up. Now that's unusual, that's not a normal thing. So we'll start to reassemble this now, and then we'll show you the adjustment of this. There's a couple of little things you've got to check. Everything's nice and clean, been in the ultrasonic cleaner. So let's get onto that and put it together and adjust it. Now as you reassemble this, there's a bracket, which is this bracket here, and you can see it also from the top. That has to be perpendicular to this here. It adjusts the throw, how high the armature goes. So if you have it too low, it won't drive far enough. If you have it too high, it'll overdrive. So you've got to have it as close to being perpendicular as possible, like I have here in this picture. Now the next step here will be to, see, you can push it down a bit. It's down a bit there now. Look at it from the top. It doesn't look too bad. Now the next step is to put the armature plate in and the spring on it so that'll hold up while you screw the other side down, because it's this screw here, screw hole here, where these two screws go that control the pivot of it. So you've just got to be fairly careful with that. So let's do that. Right, so we've reassembled this, and as you can see, as I said, that bracket is pretty well perpendicular to the frame. It all works quite well now. Now, we did have to lob a couple of links off that spring. You generally find that you have to do it, and particularly if the unit has switches on it, because they put extra weight on it. If they do have switches on, you've got to sometimes adjust the switches up a little bit to make sure they're not bottoming out in the tooth of the big black gear that's normally on there for that. Now, the only thing I've noticed on this is that the gear, if you watch it very, very carefully, it does step back a little before it goes forward. The reason for that is the check pawl, which is that beast there, that arm, which is adjustable by 2 screws up here. Oh dear. Those 2 screws in the middle there, I'm going to loosen them off and adjust that a little bit more finely so that it doesn't step backwards. Now that takes a little bit of mucking around. You've got to loosen them off and move it and try and hold it. These are fiddly. I mean, once you get used to them, they're pretty good. You still have trouble with them, but we're getting this back together from the dead. It just wouldn't move, so it's all good. All right, we've adjusted the check pawl, and now if you look at the gear carefully, when we drive, it doesn't step backwards at all. Okay, now the other adjustment that you need to consider when you do these is these 2 screws here. When you put them back on, ensure that the metal isn't touching. It's centralised. See how there's an air gap around the edge of the plastic. And of course the other thing you've got to do is make sure that the pins on both sides are lined up, the contact points. So that one's on number 3 at the moment. You've got to make sure the other one's on 3 when you put it back together. So we'll finish assembling this and then we'll be pretty well good to go. We'll just show you the finished product in just a moment. Now Spanky just reminded me of another thing, which is true. You've got to make sure that this, I'm not sure what they'd call it, it's like a pressure finger. You've got to make sure that's not bent, say, not bent down or up. You have it as straight as possible, because that can put drag or create drag on that. So when you're putting them on, just make sure they are, and you can adjust them. I use a switchblade adjusting tool to adjust them if they are a bit tight. And how you figure that out is if the pawl was to stick and not drive properly, and you thought you were very happy with the spring tension, etc., just lightly lift that up on either side to see if it lets it advance. That's the way to do that. Rightio, the job's now complete. Both boards are back on. It works properly, which is what's required of it. There it goes. So that's what we do when we do a FSAS relay. Yeah, you've really got to pull them right down, clean everything up, clean the point contacts. Oh, I used a little bit of alcohol to clean the printed circuit board, then polish the contacts with a autosol. Makes them come up nicely. And we had to put a rat tail file through that part there on the rusty bit. But other than that, it's good to go now. She should be good for another 20 years before it needs any work done. So once again, we try and make these videos informative for you. We'd really appreciate it if you give us the thumbs up with the like button. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. We intend to do more videos over the coming weeks. So stay tuned. And this has been another Goat Shed presentation.